true or false? I think the government is doing a good job. If you answered false, keep watching this video. The government tells us that we can change the system by voting. However, regardless of which political ideology is in charge, the ills of society seem to keep getting worse. The politicians have been abusing their power and mismanaging our money. The results have been an increase in poverty, homelessness, and prison population. If one government wants to regulate the behavior of another government without violence, they use economic force. Those of us who are thoroughly disappointed with our government can use economic force against them. We can remind them and ourselves of our true power. I am calling for the boycott of the DMV and traffic court. The boycott of the DMV and traffic court is a protest against the government. This protest will overcome the two major hurdles that most protests face. Hurdle number one, most protests are ineffective. If the protest is simply asking for the elected officials to do the will of the people, the protest is doomed to failure. In order for a protest to be effective, there has to be a call to action. Even the protests that overcome the first hurdle and are effective oftentimes fail to the second hurdle, an avoidance of violence. The more support that a protest receives, the higher the likelihood that there will be violence. By boycotting the DMV and taking all of our traffic violations to a trial by jury, we will avoid gathering in large numbers. It is all too common that when people gather in large numbers to protest those in power oftentimes respond with violence. By utilizing the power of jury nullification, we can cut off their billion-dollar revenue stream from our pockets to theirs. On January 1st, 2020, I'm going to indefinitely remove my license plates from my vehicle in defiance of a grossly mismanaged government. When I am eventually pulled over, either my car will be impounded or I will simply receive a fix-it ticket. In traffic court, they will either charge me with an infraction or a misdemeanor. If they charge me with an infraction, I will not be granted the right to a trial by jury. Since traffic court is under the umbrella of civil law, which is basically contracts and agreements, I can only assume the infraction refers to me breaching a contract the state assumes that I am in. If one party entered into the contract under a threat of force, that contract is not legally binding. It is a widely held belief that if you do not enter into a contract with the DMV, but you attempt to travel on the public roads in the common way, then police officers will arrest you. Every contract I've ever entered into with the DMV has been under a threat of force. My very presence in court is evidence that that threat of force is very real. If the court still decides to penalize me for the removal of my license plate from my personal vehicle, I will simply refuse to pay the fine until it escalates to the point to where I would have a trial by jury. If they were to impound my car instead of giving me a simple fix-it ticket. When I am in traffic court, I will exercise my right to a trial by jury. By their own rules, they are not allowed to deprive me of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Due process means I either agree to be punished or I have to be convicted by a jury. At my trial, I will refuse a public defender so that I can make my own opening statements to the jury. I will explain to them why I removed my license plates, and I will ask them to do their part in upholding the boycott of the DMV and traffic court. In a court of law, you have the judge and you have the attorneys who are all well versed in the law, and they put on some legal theatrics for a jury who is not well versed in the law. But it is the jury that has all the decision-making power in the court of law. The reason that the one group of people with the least amount of knowledge in the law has the most power in the court of law is because the framers of the justice system knew that the law could be weaponized and used against the people. So they gave us the power of jury nullification. Jury nullification, a sanctioned doctrine of trial proceedings wherein members of a jury disregard either the evidence presented or the instructions of the judge in order to reach a verdict based upon their own conscience. It espouses the concept that jurors should be judges of both law and fact. No jury in the history of America has ever been in trouble for their decision. Juries are not liable for their findings. The fate of the boycott lies in the hands of the juries. Not only can the juries find not guilty, but the juries can penalize the police departments for impounding vehicles. The more times juries penalize the police department for impounding vehicles, the more times the police department is going to decide to not impound vehicles. Prohibition came to an end, largely in part because juries stopped convicting on alcohol-related victimless crimes. This boycott can only be successful as a group effort. There are 3 ways to support this boycott. Number 1, be a bear poker. Remove your license plate on January 1st, 2020 to show your defiance of a grossly mismanaged and violent government. Number 2, be a line drawer. Draw the proverbial line in the sand. Refuse any more government fines and take all of your naturally acquired traffic violations and parking tickets to a trial by jury. Number 3, be a nullifier. Commit to serving jury duty. Consider using the power of jury nullification if you're sitting on any victimless crime. If we flood the justice system with trials by jury, and the jury stop convicting when the state cannot produce a flesh and blood living victim, we will begin to regulate the police departments and the elected officials. If the juries won't convict, the law doesn't mean squat. If you support this boycott, I ask that you take action right now by liking this video and sharing it on all of your social medias. This boycott will only work if we can share the idea. Let your friends, your family, and your coworkers know that you plan to uphold the boycott of the DMV and traffic court with the power of jury nullification. This has been Boycott Radio.